Hi, it's Bettina Hardy here, and I'm lucky enough to be with Rebecca Lim. This is episode 4, conversation about Australia's immigration policy, the Manus story 2013 to 2020. Rebecca, I'm really interested to know, you were saying that between 2014 and 2016, you had gone to Manus as a contractor in terms of as a migration professional to do applications for the men that were there. But you then went back as a volunteer in 2016. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of won't talk about the 2014 to 2016 because, we have contracts and all this kind of confidentiality clauses. So anyway, after doing the last lot of merits review for predominantly the Sri Lankan Tamil clients, I was doing applications for people from many other countries as well. But in terms of the merits review, I went back specifically for that, finished that in mid-2016 and resigned. It was just too much scrutiny on me, not happy about that, by Australian Border Force. Was there really? PNG Immigration didn't really mind too much what we were doing. So I remember one particular incident that, so at this time, the men were sort of had freedom to move around and out of detention. And I think it was the first time that they were allowed out, and it was my day off. So I organized to buy some fish, cook some rice from a little cafe place, and then we all had kind of lunch by the seaside. It was my day off, mind you.
2016?
2016. I was reported to Canberra for having lunch with the refugees, the men. It was all very we're just sitting down having lunch, right? So I thought, this is enough. So anyway, I know my purpose really was to try and get as many of them with, refugee status, and then I didn't really need to go back. After all, I wasn't really a frequent fly-out person. 2014, I only went twice. 15, I went 3-4 times. And 16, I went 3 times again. So I decided I would resign. And then I thought, okay, I've seen a lot. I know kind of what's going on. I'd like to be able to come back and help the people I've been supporting, mainly with resettlement options. Mm-hmm. Because at that stage, there was no options. People didn't really know what was going to happen. It certainly wasn't the US deal. So I did a bit of an audit with all 23 Tamils who were kind of my clients. Tried to find out who had relatives overseas and what their skills were, that kind of thing. So I kind of did that. And then I kind of after that, I kind of went back again. I went back quite a few times, maybe every second, third month. And initially my visits were self-funded in terms of I paid myself. And being on the ground was very helpful because I kind of knew that the medical care was very limited. Mm-hmm. The population of Manus province is 60,000, the whole province, which includes many islands. The town population of Loringau is about 6,000, with one public hospital, 40 beds maybe. Not more than 50 beds, I think I recall. I might be wrong. A community clinic, and of course you've got small clinics in the islands, that kind of thing. So we so many media reports, mostly quite factual and reliable. Healthcare was really substandard despite Australia paying a lot of money. And we've gone through a number of health providers as well.
Were they all local providers or were they brought in from Australia?
The doctors were all international medical graduates. I think, more recently it became, there were local doctors. But generally the staff were fly-in, fly-out people.
Paid by Australia?
Of course.
Uh-huh.
I think what was concerning was it seemed the locals were telling me there didn't seem to be any extra or additional medication. So whatever, there is, this extra population of 1,500 men at this stage. As time went on, there were lesser men because some went home, and we've had some deaths as well, custodial deaths. But there didn't seem to be any extra medication. So you've got already limited medication for the Manus population, then you've got all these extra foreigners. So there was a lot of stress on the local hospital. There's a lot of goodwill though. As I, spend more time there, I got to know people. Yeah, so I was concerned about healthcare and just the practicalities. If you got sick, there was no ambulance, how would you navigate all that kind of thing, And as I mentioned, when the men started coming into town, there's a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of them and us. We didn't know who you were. So there's a lot of attacks on the men, as time went on, and the community started interacting with the men and engaging more positively. Relationships got a little bit better. And the men all miss their families. Some of them have their own children, others have brothers and sisters, and the children also became very friendly. The men, they looked at them, they called them papu, papu, which is really like uncle, that kind of thing. And the word papu is actually very unique to Manus. Because if you say papu in Port Moresby, they just look at you, they don't know what you're talking about. So it must be a Manus kind of a dialect or a way of saying. But generally, if we don't know people, we'll just say brother or sister or something. But papu was the kids would always call the men papu, and the refugees would buy sweets and, interact with the villagers and the people in the village. So I kind of went back on my own, kind of decided to do it. And whatever I could do, I've got a unique set of skills and knowledge and, interest in doing what I needed to do.
And incredibly generous of you to self-fund the whole thing. You were saying in our last episode, you were talking about a lot of the men who had physical chronic health conditions, but also obviously psychological conditions due to the trauma that they'd experienced. Can you talk to us a little bit about their health and well-being whilst they were there? Because you've just also mentioned that there was a lack of additional medication. So I'm curious to know how the men's not only physical but their emotional and psychological well-being was managed.
So we know that when the men were in Lone Broom Naval Base, which is outside of Lorengau, many of them would survive on antidepressants because life was difficult, and there was no sense of, I've had my first interview, how much longer do I have to wait for the outcome? Or I've just had a negative result from my first interview, how much longer will I have to wait for a merits review? And if I get a negative merits review, they're going to deport me, they're going to send me back. And there were no phones at that stage either to contact family. There was landline. I mean, there was you had to line up for a public phone, inverted commas, and then, try to contact your family that way. Some men didn't even tell their family where they were because they were, families get very stressed. Sometimes say, where's Papua New Guinea? Families don't even know where Papua New Guinea is, and what does that mean? You're in PNG. I thought, you went to Australia to get safety kind of thing. So the mental health, deteriorated. Yeah, obviously. And because when you're locked up, it's locked detention, no certainty, no hope. In terms of physical health too, people were getting kidney stones, or if they, played sport and had an injury, a shoulder injury or a leg injury, there's just very limited capacity. The doctors were telling me, if you've got malaria or you've got TB, we know how to treat you. We can deliver a baby, but we have no orthopedic experience. And in terms of dental care, we can fill, we can extract, but if you need any dental cosmetic, like dentures or something, you have to go to Moresby anyway. So, these are kinds of the, a Manus person who needs heart surgery will have to go to Moresby. And if you're a person in Moresby and you've got the money, you go to the Philippines for your heart treatment, right? You don't even get it done in Port Moresby. So that's kind of the level of, not that they're not qualified, but I guess they don't see, it's just a different population, the kinds of sicknesses. And, the Manus Islanders, their experience of refugees are the West Papuans. They don't even know who's a refugee and what does that mean and why people flee. And, so as I started engaging, I had enough money to pay for probably 3 visits and then I ran out of money. But all my kind of networks in Australia, every time I go, I'd kind of write back and update people about what's happening more because, I just wanted people to know. So groups got together and started helping really, accommodation was kind of not so expensive if you kind of know where to go. So yes, I've lived the village life. So enough. So I had help obviously to pay for the flights and, transport was kind of, in terms of the meals, when the refugees had, some allowance and they pool a bit of their money together, they would often not let me pay for food. So we go to the market and food's not so expensive. Seafood's quite cheap. Like a decent sized mud crab is 10 or 15 kina. That's like five $5. So crab curry once a week. And fish, and there's bananas and stuff like that. So we don't eat very expensive. So, and then kind of more and more groups, I'm very grateful to, Manus Lives Matters in Canberra, Sisters of Mercy, individual groups who, and you know who you are if you're listening to this. And so that's really has allowed me to continue to go back from mid-2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, until mid-2019. Then I spent a bit more time in Port Moresby, and that's with Catholic Bishops' Conference and Caritas PNG.
So, and that's something we can talk about at another time, but I'm curious, so what were you doing when you were going back? What were you doing?
Yeah, so apart from doing kind of the skills audit, I was also making a very conscious effort to get to know the locals, in particular the Catholic Church. I'm Catholic, so the Catholic Church and the Seventh-day Adventists are kind of the two largest Christian groups. So on each visit I'd engage. I probably haven't been to so many masses as I have in Manus Island, which is great though. The village churches are wonderful. Very grateful to Father Clement Taulam, who is the Dean of the Manus province. I've been a priest for, I don't know, how old are you? Maybe 30, 40 years, he tells me. I guess the purpose of that was to kind of build bridges so that the men had reliable people to contact should they encounter any problems. So we established a very good link. Michael Kuway and Julie are kind of the stalwarts in Lorengau, actually. They're from that parish. I first met them actually at the local church. So I used to go to Mass on a Sunday, 7:30. So committed. Stay until 8:15 and run down the hill to go to my job to start at 8:30. So we kind of had those relationships, and then eventually got to meet the Manus Council of Churches. So that's the other congregations, the Pentecostals, the Methodists, the Baptists, other church leaders who themselves were doing good things. They would engage, a couple of the men ended up marrying local girls, so they'd have a church wedding kind of thing. The whole purpose. So what else did I do? I guess I spent a lot of my time kind of with community engagement, because I really wanted to raise awareness of the plight of the men and to explain to the Manus Islanders. I got quite close to the St. Vincent de Paul, St. Raphael Conference, and Martha Purai, who's now deceased. She was the matron of the Lorengau Hospital. And she was a very, really good lady, and her sister Liz. So kind of supported St. Vincent de Paul. I remember Martha saying to me one day, Rebecca, it's so good that you've come and you've explained to us who's a refugee and these men's stories, and you've introduced them to us. Look at Raj, he cooks such nice food, and Ramzi and, the other men, and also the Pakistanis and the Afghans and, Bangladeshis. 3 or 4 of the Bangladeshis, were working in some of the smaller shops there. So as the men spent more time in the community, and the community people started getting to know the men, they were like their sons or their brothers, and I think that built bridges. So obviously if they were in trouble, they knew there was somewhere they could go to. So there was a lot to do, actually.
It's interesting because it sounds like your role there was obviously community development, community engagement, but to actually, I guess, provide that link for the men to have the support that they need. So being able to develop some really strong support networks around them.
That was exactly the reason for me doing this, because it's hard to provide support from Australia. You kind of need on-the-ground response. So we'd have dramas all the time about somebody who's sick, or they go to the hospital's full, or they don't understand what's happening, they can't get the medical records, or they might have a small altercation with somebody, what does that mean? Does it have to go to court? That kind of thing. So yes, it was very useful. I'm very grateful to many of the local community, faith-based and non-faith-based, leaders within the Manus community. And kind of did that. I was very welcome. A lot of people ask me all the time, did I feel unsafe? Nah. I walk out 10 p.m., 11 a.m., 11 p.m., no big deal. I mean, it's about your one talk. They talk about your one talk. Your one talk is like your family. So I've become like a Manus Mary. Manus is Manus, and Mary is a woman, as in Mary, but it's really Meri. So they call me Manus Mary, which is really nice. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I did a lot of work. There's a few things I've done which I don't want to talk publicly about, that's linking with some government leaders, nothing untoward about it, but just more about, this is what's happening, can you help, kind of thing. But yeah, I think, as relationships started building, I think things got a little bit better on both sides. I also started a training program, the refugees, because some of them were getting bored and wanted to do something. So I kind of said, what short course can we do online? So I found a 2-hour basic food safety course that is delivered by the Australian Institute of Food Safety, Brisbane-based. So I thought, 2 hours, okay, we can manage that with internet, maybe 5 hours, kind of thing. We need laptops. So anyway, I rang the college in Brisbane and I said, okay, I'm going to have this bulk enrollment. It's $50 for the course. I've asked for donations. I managed to get that. So I kind of spread the word around, and probably 10 refugees or 11 refugees. By this stage, people had been locked up for a while now. So not everyone is in the right frame of mind to do courses, but those who were able to. So I kind of did 2 at a time in the kitchen of the lodge where I was staying. All courses had free lunch provided. Of course, our resident chef Raj and his 2 assistants would be helping. Lunch is important. Yeah. We found that the Manus people had breakfast and they had dinner. Very few people had lunch. Some couldn't afford to have lunch, and some just didn't. So all my meetings, we broke bread together over lunch and everyone came. I don't care whether they came just for the food or to see me. It doesn't matter. The fact is that I got through to them.
Yes.
So, and then I decided, how can I do something for the community? So I offered the course to Manus people, and I think I was counting more than 40 Manus people attended my course. Yeah. And they included teachers in home economics and non-home economics teachers. I included the chef of the local restaurant. I said, chef, you need to come. If nobody else comes to my course, you need to attend. Else no one's going to eat at your restaurant. He says, yes, madam, I'll come. So the chef completed the course, and then he could go on and train his kitchen hands. And who else did we have? Government officials come. I had the child protection officer attend. I had the mayor did my course. And it's just, it was such a simple thing to do. Yeah. It was all funded. Funded by donations. I didn't charge any of them. Fed them, did group sessions. I had a retired principal. I had a whole heap of professionals and normal Manus Islanders. Suddenly everybody wanted to do the course. Such a useful course anyway. It's just about basic hygiene and food safety and peanut allergies and, don't cut vegetables after you've used the meat board. The kind of stuff that we take for granted. Yeah. So it was very helpful.
So it sounds like it was about you giving back, as you say, to be able to really cement the relationships. Yeah?
Very much so. Yeah. And I was also invited to an outreach island visit by the Child Protection and Family Violence Unit in the police boat. And so they, kind of asked me if I wanted to come along. I said, yeah, sure. So I kind of went to 2 island visits with them, and they were doing outreach. They were talking about child labor, you should not be sending your child to Pixego when they should be in school. We were talking about grandparents being able to access, similar to our child support. Yes. So a lot of parents are kind of expecting grandparents to look after children. And they were talking about teenage pregnancies. If your daughter is pregnant, you should still be able to go to school. Yeah. And the school can support, to continue her education. Family violence, don't beat your wives, that kind of stuff. Yes. So that was quite a privilege to be invited. It was we made a day out of it. Other island visits we did was really to also community awareness. And I managed to get donations and donated fishing nets to a few of the other island communities. The refugees always came with me, whether it was 1 or whether it was 10.
And why was that?
It was important for them, for the Manus Islanders, to meet real people. Because if you're in a village somewhere, you don't always come to town. So you kind of hear about the men, you kind of hear about attacks, you kind of hear about things, but you don't actually get to meet any of them. Yes. So plus it's a day out for the men as well. So someone always came with me, whether it's one person, Raj, or Ramzi, or other people, or Sri, or Neithan, or sometimes the Burmese came, sometimes the Pakistanis came, a couple of Iranians has also come with me. And so it was just community awareness as well as engaging. And then with St. Vincent de Paul, that particular conference, their priority was to support people with disability. So they took on 2 boys as I won't say as a project, but to support these 2 boys. One was Fitla, who was born blind, and so didn't get to go to school. So I went to visit him, and he said he loved music. So I said, would you like to learn the guitar? So he said, yes. So I got the donation to buy a guitar for him and paid for lessons. And Father Clement kind of organized that for him. And then Komai was a 15-year-old. Fiddler was about 8 or 9 years old. Komai is about 14 or 15, and he had one leg that was deformed, and his crutches were wearing out. So he needed a new pair of crutches. So this was St. Vincent de Paul's focus. So I contacted a friend who's now retired from politics, and she donated a brand new pair of crutches. So this is about giving back.
Yes.
A community that's very traumatized and just had these men dump on them with no consultation, by the way, at all.
And it sounds, and a lot of misinformation. So there was fear towards the men because of what they had been told. It sounds a little bit kind of like it's gotten a little bit rosy, but I can't imagine that it is. So where were the men living during this period of time?
During this period, they had left Lombrum under very difficult circumstances, so they were forced to leave the naval camp, and this is October, November 2016. 2016, yeah. So it was in April 2016 when the Supreme Court found it was unconstitutional. So then it took months before the men, and the way the men were forced out was quite brutal. Many lost their property, many of them were injured. I was there at the time. I was kind of a guide consultant for a humanitarian group that included Tim Costello and other people from the humanitarian sector. And we so happened to be on island at the time that the men were forced out. So we were staying at a place. There were doctors with us, and there was a few other agencies with us, and the men used to come and see us and get treatment, that kind of thing. So they were forced out unceremoniously, and to this day, the men have lost laptops, phones, some of them their personal documents, because of the way it was done. That wasn't very good. So anyway, at the time that I was kind of there, 17, 18, 19, the men were already in transit centers in town. Of course, the freedom to move. I mean, they still had to sign in and out and go through security gates. And they would, but they they would move around during the day. So this is why we talk about, going out and engaging with the community. It really wasn't rosy at all. There's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, it sounds, as you said, rosy, but, this is important, But at the end of the day, the men still didn't have hope about what was happening. There's an expectation they would resettle in PNG, and we know UNHCR is going to report that PNG and Nauru are not resettlement countries. They don't have capacity, and fancy Australia paying all this money to dump them in a developing country. It gave some respite to the men, I suppose.
Yes.
It's just normal things.
Yes.
Just go fishing, go swimming, have a day out, get some sunshine. But then we've also seen media reports where they say, why they're complaining it's paradise. I mean, it's paradise to the Manus people. It's not paradise when you're a refugee, when you're not, you're not a Manus person. To talk about resettling there, it's a patriarchal society. Regardless of whether you become a citizen or you live there, how many years you live there, you still cannot own land because it's a hand-me-down. It's a patriarchal tribal society. End of story. It's not a matriarchal society like some other provinces might be. Manus is patriarchal. So being a non-PNG person, you will never inherit land. How are you going to build a house and have a business? Even fishing off someone's land and swimming by the beach where someone owns the land, we had to ask permission. So to go to a swimming hole, not really the ocean, but it wasn't someone's land. And they were very gracious. And they said, yeah, go and swim, kind of thing. Or if you fish here, share with us whatever your catch was, kind of thing.
It sounds to me then that the community engagement, the community development work that you're doing was so important to enable the men to have some kind of life there that was going to be safe.
Yes, absolutely. I think that was kind of what I wanted to do. I mean, as safe that is reasonably possible. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still not your country. It's where is it safe? In Brisbane, there's certain places in Brisbane we don't even go to anyway, right? You know, so it's as safe as possible. Who are your networks? Who can you call on? You know, the local community. In fact, the local community, you know, when they got to know people, they would kind of tell the rascals, like, you know, you don't touch this person. He's my one talk, you know. So it provided some level of protection. And, you know, we can then talk later about you know, the babies born on Manus to Manus women and refugee men, and there's a whole heap of other, you know, social situations in Manus that, you know, we've caused a lot of grief to that community.
Well, can I just say thank you? I think this is a good place to end this episode, but to say thank you, and also to thank you for the generosity and the amount of compassion and kindness that you show, you know, to have gone out of your way as you have to try and develop, I guess, some support networks for these men, which sounds like was absolutely crucial. So thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Fatina.